When he called me his miracle at 60, I thought it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. I was wrong. Back then, those words melted every wall I'd built around my heart. For years, I'd convinced myself love was something that belonged to my past, a thing for younger women with soft hands and fewer regrets. I had made peace with the silence of my house, with the sound of the kettle whistling to an empty kitchen, with the bed that never dipped on the other side. Then David walked in. It was late spring when we met again, a reunion of sorts. The University Alumni Committee had sent an invitation for a 40-year gathering. I almost threw it away, but something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe loneliness, made me go. The banquet hall was filled with the noise of laughter that didn't quite match the faces that made it. People in their 60s trying to sound like they were still in their 20s. I recognized a few smiles, a few names. But when I saw him across the room, time didn't just rewind. It folded. David Harris, my college sweetheart, my first real love, the boy who once promised he'd build me a white house with a porch and a garden full of tulips. He hadn't changed much, a little gray in his hair, a little weariness around his eyes, but his smile, that same crooked, shy smile, could still light up a room. When he saw me, he froze. "Clara?" he said softly, as if afraid the name might disappear if he said it too loud. And just like that, 40 years vanished between us. We talked all night, about everything and nothing. He told me about his years working abroad, about losing his wife 5 years ago to illness, about how quiet his home had become since. I told him about my own loss, a husband gone too soon, a life that had turned into routines and chores. By the end of the evening, we were the last two people in the hall, laughing over cold coffee. Before I left, he said, "Maybe the universe wanted us to have another chance. And when you're 60, you don't expect chances anymore." So I said yes to the universe. Our courtship was gentle, almost old-fashioned. He brought flowers, always tulips, and called every morning just to say, "Good day, my miracle." Within months, we were inseparable. My friends joked that I was glowing again. My daughter, Emma, was cautious. She'd seen me hurt before. But even she admitted David seemed kind, genuine, and patient. 6 months later, we got married in my backyard. A small, simple ceremony, white roses, laughter, the kind of peace I thought I'd never feel again. When we exchanged vows, David's voice trembled as he said, "I will spend the rest of my life making up for the time I lost loving you." I believed him. Our new life together was quiet but full of tenderness. We settled in my old brick house in the suburbs. He insisted he wanted a place that already had love in its walls. He cooked breakfast every Sunday, always scrambled eggs and burnt toast. We took morning walks. He'd hum old songs, sometimes forgetting the lyrics. He made me tea every evening, sitting with me on the porch until the sun sank below the trees. At night, he'd rest his head on my lap and talk about how lucky we were to have found each other again. I thought, maybe love doesn't care about time after all, but even the gentlest winds can carry storms. It started small. A few phone calls he took outside, a few messages that made him look uneasy. When I asked, he said it was just work, though he was retired. He said he was helping an old friend with some property papers abroad. I wanted to believe him. At our age, trust is something you protect fiercely. You don't want to start over again with suspicion. Then came the trips, short ones, he said. "Just a few days in Canada, love, helping sort out a family estate." He'd come back with souvenirs, maple syrup, scarves, postcards. But something about the way his eyes avoided mine told me the souvenirs were meant to distract me. One night, as we sat watching a movie, his phone lit up. A woman's name appeared on the screen, Lydia. He snatched it quickly, smiling nervously. "Old colleague," he said. "She's helping with the paperwork." The next morning, I noticed he'd deleted all his messages, every single one. Still, I tried to silence the noise inside my chest. After all, wasn't I too old to play detective in my own marriage? I told myself I was overthinking, that David was a good man. He had to be, because the alternative, that I'd been fooled again, was too painful to imagine. But love, real love, doesn't need excuses to survive. Lies do. Weeks passed. Then one evening, while doing laundry, I found something. A folded piece of paper in his jacket pocket. It was a plane ticket. Not to Canada, but to Lisbon. One way. I remember sitting on the cold floor of the laundry room staring at it, the sound of the washing machine spinning beside me like a mocking rhythm. I tried to tell myself there must be an explanation. There had to be. When he came home that night, I asked him, gently, "David, why Lisbon?" He froze. His hand trembled slightly as he set down his keys. "Just business, Clara." "Nothing important." "Business where?" He sighed. "I'll tell you when I come back." Please don't worry. But the way he said, "when I come back," sent a chill through me, as if he wasn't sure he would. That night, I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked endlessly. I watched the ceiling until dawn, thinking of every promise he'd ever made, every smile that might have been practiced. Somewhere deep inside me, I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. But the truth doesn't wait for permission, and it was about to arrive. With a message that would shatter everything I thought I knew about the man I married. It started with something as small as a name on a phone screen. Mei Lin. A message flashed while David was in the shower. It said, "Miss you already." The kids ask about you every day. At first, I told myself it was a wrong number, maybe an old friend, maybe a work contact. My heart wanted to believe that. My mind, though, it whispered otherwise. He came out of the bathroom whistling, towel over his shoulder, steam following him like a ghost. I was sitting on the bed pretending to scroll through recipes. My fingers trembled. "Who's Mei Lin?" I asked casually. He froze, just for a second. But it was enough. His smile faltered before returning, too polished. "Oh, she's just a friend from Singapore. I worked with her years ago." I said, forcing a smile. "She says the kids miss you." He chuckled nervously. "Oh, her students, I think. She's a teacher." That night, while he slept, I stared at the ceiling. My heart beat like it was warning me, but I pushed it away. Love at 60 doesn't come easy, and I wasn't ready to break the fragile happiness I'd finally found. Over the next few weeks, small things began to stand out. David suddenly became more busy. Business calls at odd hours, a new password on his laptop. He started traveling more, and first to Dallas, then to San Diego. Always alone. When I offered to come along once, he smiled but said, "You'd be bored, sweetheart." It's all meetings and men in suits. One evening, as I folded laundry, I found a train ticket in his jacket pocket. Seattle, not Dallas. The date didn't match his story. I sat on the edge of the bed, ticket in hand, heart pounding. The air in the room felt heavy, almost alive. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. "Don't be that kind of wife," I whispered. "You've been alone too long. You're just scared of losing him." But fear has a way of sharpening the senses. The next day, I called the number that had texted him, pretending to be from his bank, asking to confirm his details. A soft, accented voice answered. "Hello? David?" she said. I froze. She sounded young, mid-30s maybe. There were children laughing in the background. I hung up immediately, heart racing, breath shallow. For hours, I sat by the window, watching the wind move through the trees. My reflection in the glass looked older, smaller, like I was fading into something invisible. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how he brushed my hair every morning, how he always poured my coffee first, how he said, "I'll never leave you again." Again. That word now haunted me. Again meant there was a before. Weeks passed, and I lived in silence, performing love like it was theater. I smiled when he came home. I cooked his favorite meals. But inside, I was unraveling. Then, one morning, he left his laptop open. I don't know what pushed me, curiosity or desperation, but my hand moved before I could stop it. The screen showed an email draft addressed to Mei Lin. The subject read, "Tickets for you and the kids." My breath caught as I read, "I'll visit after the holidays. Don't worry. She suspects nothing. I'll transfer the money next week." I closed the laptop slowly, my fingers trembling so hard I nearly dropped it. My stomach turned, and I rushed to the bathroom, sick with betrayal. In the mirror, I saw a woman I didn't recognize, hair disheveled, eyes swollen, mouth trembling. I whispered, "Why didn't I see this coming?" But maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't want to believe that love could lie so easily, especially at this age. That evening, when he came home, I was sitting in the kitchen, a cup of untouched tea beside me. He kissed my forehead. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "I just feel tired." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "You worry too much, Claire." But the truth was, I wasn't tired. I was awakening. For the first time, I saw every detail clearly. How he flinched when his phone buzzed, how his eyes darted when I mentioned travel, how his smile was rehearsed. The walls of our home, the home we built with laughter and promises, suddenly felt hollow. I realized then that the silence between us wasn't peace. It was distance. And I was finally ready to find out just how far that distance went. The morning I discovered the truth was quiet. Painfully quiet. The kind of stillness that feels like the air itself is holding its breath. David had left early, saying he was heading to Seattle for a client meeting. His suitcase sat by the door the night before, perfectly packed. Too perfectly. After he left, I stared at that empty spot on the floor for a long time, feeling something hollow bloom inside me. Then, without planning it, I stood up, walked to his study, and opened the desk drawer. Inside was a small leather pouch. He'd always kept it hidden. Inside were his passport, some receipts, and a photograph. It was him, standing on a beach, his arm around a woman. She was young, pretty, her skin golden, her smile unguarded. Two little boys stood in front of them, sand clinging to their legs. On the back, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "Summer, Singapore, 2019, Daddy's home." My knees buckled. I sat on the floor, the photograph pressed against my chest like it might burn through my skin. The ticking clock was deafening. Every second sounded like an accusation. For years, I'd believed I was his beginning again, that after life had bruised us both, we had found peace together. But now, I was just a shadow in his story. I don't remember when I started crying. Maybe it was when I opened his email again and saw their thread, hundreds of messages between them. She wrote, "The boys loved your video call last night. When will you come home for good?" And he replied, "Soon, May. I just need to make sure Claire's taken care of first." Taken care of. Like I was a loose end. A project. My breath hitched, and I let out a sound I didn't recognize. Half sob, half scream. I read on, every message another knife. Vacations he promised her, photos he sent from our living room, lies dressed as love. The truth wasn't a single blow. It was 1,000 cuts, small and deep. That evening, I sat on our porch swing, the photograph still in my hand. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft orange. It should have been beautiful. But beauty doesn't matter when your world ends quietly. I heard his car pull up hours later. My heart didn't race this time. I was empty. He walked up the steps, smiling as if nothing in the world was wrong. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, kissing my cheek. "You okay?" "You look pale." I handed him the photo. For a second, his face drained of color. Then he blinked, slow, careful, and smiled that same practiced smile. "Where did you find that?" he asked. "Your drawer," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. "Who are they?" He hesitated. Claire, it's not what it looks like. I laughed, a bitter, trembling sound. Please, don't say that. It's exactly what it looks like. He sat down across from me, elbows on his knees. Listen, I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how long, I asked. Since before we reconnected, he said quietly. She and I, we met overseas. I didn't plan for it to go this far. I felt my heart collapse inward, slow and painful. And the children? He looked away. That was my answer. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick, pulsing with things that could never be unsaid. Finally, I whispered, "Why marry me then? Why pretend?" He rubbed his face. "Because I loved you once, Claire. I thought maybe I could make it right. You were safe, familiar. I didn't want to hurt you." My voice broke. "But you did." He sighed, a long, exhausted breath. "You don't understand. I gave up so much for her. She's younger, she has the boys. I needed stability here too. I didn't want to lose everything. I stared at him, numb. "So you married me for stability?" He didn't answer. That night, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat in the dark after he fell asleep on the couch, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. Two smiling fools holding hands, believing in something that never existed. My body was cold, my mind eerily clear. I realized something then. Betrayal isn't just what someone does to you. It's what they erase, your faith, your trust, your version of the truth. And now I had to rebuild mine, from ashes. The next morning, I made him breakfast. Out of habit more than love. Scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. He looked uneasy, unsure how to act. I'll fix this," he said quietly. "I'll go to Singapore one last time, settle things, and come back." "We'll talk then," I nodded slowly. "Do what you need to do." When he left, I watched his car disappear down the street. Then I closed the door and locked it. This time, I wasn't waiting for him to come home. That day, I packed his things into boxes, neatly, silently. Every folded shirt felt like closure. Every drawer emptied felt like a breath I'd been holding for years. When I reached the nightstand, I found my wedding ring box inside, the one he'd proposed with. Tucked beneath it was a letter I'd never seen before. It was from her. "Thank you for letting him go back to you, even for a while. He said you were lonely, that you needed him. I didn't mind. I know where his heart truly lives." My hands shook so hard I could barely fold the letter back. That was the moment I realized he hadn't just lied to me. He had made me the other woman in his own twisted story, and that was something I could never forgive. When someone betrays you at 30, you cry and rage. When someone betrays you at 60, you grow silent. You've lived long enough to know that anger burns too fast, and what you need is endurance. So I waited, not for him, but for myself, to think clearly, to act wisely. For 2 weeks, I went about my days like a ghost. I watered the garden, baked bread, even attended my book club. No one knew that my world had collapsed quietly in my living room. Every night I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the emptiness beside me. The house was too big, too still. Every creak felt like a memory trying to speak. But slowly, something inside me shifted. Pain hardened into resolve. If David thought I would crumble, he had forgotten who I was before him. The first thing I did was visit my lawyer. Her name was Ruth, a sharp, silver-haired woman who'd helped me settle my late husband's estate years ago. She looked at me across her desk, concern etched on her face. "Claire, are you sure you want to do this?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Yes, I want him out of my house, out of my accounts, out of my life." She leaned back. "You have every right. His name isn't on the deed, and if he's been unfaithful, you're protected under state law. But this will get messy." "I've lived through messy before," I said. For the first time in weeks, I felt strong. The next step was emotional, not legal. I called his daughter from his first marriage. someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Emily. She was kind to me once when we first married, before she began pulling away. When she answered, her voice was wary. "Claire, is everything all right?" "I think you should know something," I said. My voice was calm even. "Your father has another family. Abroad, a woman, 2 young boys." There was silence on the line, then a soft, shaky exhale. "I knew it," she whispered. "He kept disappearing, always saying it was business trips." Mom suspected something years ago. Hearing that broke something deeper inside me. Not just for myself, but for the trail of women who'd loved him and been deceived. We talked for over an hour. Emily cried. I didn't, not this time. Before hanging up, she said, "You deserve better, Claire." "Don't let him make you small." "I won't," I promised. 3 weeks later, David returned from Singapore. I was sitting at the dining table, papers spread neatly before me. Divorce filings, property ownership records, financial account transfers, all in order. He walked in, suitcase rolling behind him, looking tired and distracted. "Claire," he said cautiously, "we need to talk." "We do," I replied, sliding the folder toward him. He glanced at it, confusion flickering in his eyes. Then realization. "What is this?" "Freedom," I said softly. "Yours and mine." He frowned. "You're divorcing me?" "I'm releasing you," I said, "to the life you already chose. I just won't be part of the lie anymore." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "Claire, please, don't do this. I made a mistake. I thought I could manage both, but I can't lose you." I tilted my head. "You already did." He sank into the chair across from me. "You can't just erase me from your life." "You need me." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. I needed honesty, David. Partnership, respect. I folded the papers neatly. "You gave me none of those." He stared at me for a long time. Then he said quietly, "You won't survive alone." That made me smile, a sad, steady smile. "You're wrong. I've done it before. And this time, I'll do it with peace." The next morning, he packed his bags. No shouting, no drama, just silence between 2 people who once promised forever. As he walked out the door, he said, "You'll regret this one day." I looked him in the eye. "No, David. I regret ever thinking you were worth saving." And then I closed the door. For a while, the silence afterward was unbearable. I'd thought freedom would feel lighter, but it felt like walking barefoot through broken glass, necessary but painful. There were mornings I still made 2 cups of coffee out of habit, nights I reached across the bed and felt only air. But with each passing day, I learned small ways to live again. I repainted the guest room a soft cream, donated his clothes to charity, started volunteering at the community library twice a week. One afternoon, while shelving returned books, I met a woman named Nora. She was widowed too, in her 60s, and she told me she ran a support group for women rebuilding after betrayal. I went once, quietly, sitting in the back. I didn't speak the first night, but I listened. Women told stories that sounded like my own, only with different names and faces. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't alone in this kind of pain. A few months later, I took a trip by myself. It wasn't far, just a small coastal town 2 hours away, the kind of place with old bookshops, sea air, and quiet mornings. I rented a cottage near the beach. Each morning, I'd sit on the porch with tea and watch the waves roll in. The ocean had a way of reminding me that everything moves forward, no matter how many tides pull us back. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I pulled out the photo, the one I'd found in his drawer. For a long moment, I looked at it, not with anger this time, but acceptance. Then I let the wind take it. It fluttered once, twice, and disappeared into the darkening sky. And with it, the last of him left me. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. No nightmares, no restless thoughts, just peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from forgetting, but from finally letting go. A few weeks after David left, whispers began. It started with a phone call from my neighbor, Lillian. Her voice trembled with the kind of curiosity people mistake for concern. "Claire, dear, I saw David downtown yesterday. He wasn't alone." I took a slow breath. "No, he wouldn't be. He's gone back to his other life." Lillian gasped softly. "Oh, Claire, I'm so sorry." But I could hear the pause that followed, that quiet hunger for the full story, the kind that travels faster than truth ever can. By the end of that week, half the neighborhood knew. At the grocery store, eyes lingered a little too long. Conversations hushed when I walked by. It should have embarrassed me, being pitied like that. But strangely, it didn't, because I knew something they didn't. I was finally free. 2 Sundays later, I went to church for the first time in months. I hesitated at the door, worried about the whispers, the sympathetic smiles, but Pastor Ruth met me at the entrance with open arms. "I've missed seeing you here," she said softly. "I needed time," I replied. She nodded. Sometimes God lets us break, not to destroy us, but to rebuild us differently. During the service, I sat alone near the back, sunlight filtering through the stained glass. Each hymn felt like a gentle stitch, pulling me back together. When it ended, an older woman approached me. She introduced herself as Helen, a widow. She'd heard what happened, though she didn't say it outright. She simply took my hand and said, "Men like him build their homes on sand. You, my dear, will build again, on rock." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in months. Not everyone was kind, of course. At the local bookstore, I overheard 2 women murmuring near the window seat. "Did you hear? Claire's husband had another family in Asia. Poor thing." "Poor? She's lucky he's gone." At her age, most just pretend not to know. They didn't realize I was standing behind them until I cleared my throat gently. "Ladies," I said with a small smile, "pretending not to know is far lonelier than being alone." Their faces flushed crimson. I left without another word. I wasn't angry, just done. Done shrinking, done hiding, done apologizing for someone else's sins. Then one afternoon, as I was pruning my rose bushes, David's daughter, Emily, pulled into my driveway. She stepped out of the car with a hesitant smile and a bouquet of lilies in her hand. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for being honest. For telling me the truth, I took the flowers gently. You didn't deserve to be lied to either." She sighed. "He called me last week. He said he's trying to make things right. But honestly, I don't think he knows what that means anymore." We sat on the porch for over an hour, 2 women connected by the same wound. "He's not well," she said finally. "The woman overseas, she left him. He's alone now." For a brief second, I felt something stir inside me. Not pity, not satisfaction. Something quieter. Closure. Because karma doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. That night, I found myself thinking about him again, not with longing, but reflection. There was a time when I thought love meant holding on no matter what. That endurance was strength. But now I understood. Strength is knowing when to let go before you disappear inside someone else's lies. I thought about the other woman too, May. I didn't hate her anymore. Maybe she loved him once, truly. Maybe she believed his promises the way I did. Maybe she was another casualty of his cowardice. Either way, I hoped she found her peace too. One morning in late spring, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a short note written in David's familiar, slanted handwriting. "Claire, I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know that you were the best part of me. I'm sorry for what I ruined. I wish you peace." I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. And then, for the first time, I said his name out loud, softly, like a farewell. Goodbye, David. Then I folded the letter, placed it in a small wooden box where I kept old photos and keepsakes, and locked it away, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder that I survived something meant to break me. That weekend, I returned to church again. This time, I didn't sit in the back. I sat near the front, among the choir. When the pastor spoke about forgiveness, I felt tears slip quietly down my cheeks. Not for him, but for me. Because forgiveness isn't about freeing the other person. It's about freeing yourself from their shadow. After the service, Helen found me again and said, "You look lighter, dear." I smiled. I am. I finally stopped carrying someone else's story. That evening, I hosted my first dinner in months. Just a few friends, simple food, laughter that reached the walls again. At one point, as we toasted over apple pie, I caught my reflection in the window. Soft lines, silver hair, eyes tired but bright. For the first time in years, I saw a woman I admired looking back. A woman who had walked through fire and still had warmth left to give. The year that followed was not easy, but it was mine. Grief, I learned, doesn't come in waves. It lingers like fog. You wake up one day thinking it's gone, and then a familiar song, a place, a scent brings it back like a whisper. But I stopped fighting it. I started treating my pain like an old neighbor who dropped by uninvited. I'd pour her a cup of tea, let her talk for a while, and then send her on her way. In the quiet of those months, I learned new rhythms. Every morning, I walked the coastal trail near my cottage, the one lined with wildflowers and the soft hush of waves. I'd stop by a cafe run by a young couple. They started greeting me as Miss Claire, like I was family. Some days I painted, something I hadn't done in decades. My hands trembled at first, but soon colors began to speak for me when words couldn't. I painted the sea, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy. I painted an empty chair on a porch, a woman's shadow watching the sunset. And slowly, I realized the woman in my paintings wasn't lonely anymore. She was free. A few months later, Nora, the woman from the support group, invited me to help organize a storytelling event for older women. The theme was Beginnings After Betrayal. I almost said no, but something inside me stirred. So that evening, under soft yellow lights in the community hall, I stood behind a small wooden podium. My heart pounded, but my voice didn't shake. I told my story, not with bitterness, but with truth. I spoke of love found too late, of promises that turned to smoke, of a heart that cracked open and still beat on. And when I looked up, I saw tears in the audience, not of pity, but recognition. Afterward, women came to hug me, thank me, share their own stories in whispers. One of them said, "You made me believe it's not too late to start again." That night, as I walked home under the moonlight, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. The following spring, I decided to sell the old house. It no longer felt like home. It was a museum of ghosts. The realtor asked if I was sure. I smiled and said, "It's time to let the past stop collecting dust." I bought a small place near the sea instead. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a sunlit kitchen, and a porch where I could read and listen to gulls crying over the waves. On moving day, I brought only what mattered: my mother's cookbook, my late husband's watch, and a box of letters I'd written to myself during those dark months. One of those letters began with the words, "Dear Claire, you are not too old to begin again." I read it often, sometimes aloud, because somewhere along the way I stopped being the woman who was betrayed and became the woman who survived it. In early summer, I joined a local art circle. On the first day, I met a man named Walter, a retired architect with kind eyes and hands that still looked like they built things. He didn't flirt, didn't pry, he just listened. One afternoon, as we painted by the harbor, he said, "You have a calm about you, like someone who's seen storms but still stands." I smiled, maybe because I learned to stop trying to control the weather. We laughed softly, the way people do when they understand something without needing to explain it. We didn't fall in love, not yet, maybe not ever. But we built something gentler, companionship, shared silences, mutual respect, and that was enough. By autumn, I had started teaching art classes at the community center. My students were mostly women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, women who thought life had already given them all it could. But I told them, you're still the artist of your own story. You just have to pick up the brush again. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I sit on my porch and watch the stars appear one by one. I think of the girl I used to be, the young Claire who fell in love with David in college, full of dreams and laughter. And then I think of the woman I became, the one who faced betrayal at 60 and chose to rise not with rage, but with grace. If I could speak to that girl now, I'd tell her this: love doesn't always save you. Sometimes it teaches you who you are without it. I've come to believe that heartbreak is not the end of love. It's just a different kind of love story, one that begins with loss, but ends with self-discovery. Because the truth is, I didn't lose everything. I just lost what wasn't real. And what remained, my peace, my dignity, my strength, that was worth everything. Now, when I wake up in the morning, I don't feel the weight of what I lost. I feel the quiet thrill of what's still possible. At 60, I thought my story was ending, but it was only just beginning. Sometimes life doesn't fall apart. It falls into place, just not the way we imagined. When I married my college sweetheart at 60, I thought I was writing the final peaceful chapter of my life. I didn't know I was stepping into a story that would break me before it rebuilt me. But maybe that's how life works at this age. We learn that peace isn't found in perfect marriages or promises kept. It's found in the quiet strength that comes after every storm. I used to think being alone again at 60 was a tragedy. Now I know it's an act of courage, because loving again after loss and then choosing yourself after betrayal takes a kind of bravery we don't often talk about. If you've ever been hurt by someone you trusted, I want you to remember this: you are not the mistake they made. You are the lesson they left behind, and you are still allowed to begin again. Some nights, when the sea is calm and the moonlight touches the waves, I whisper a quiet thank you, not for the pain, but for what it taught me: forgiveness, freedom, and the beauty of standing tall in my own story. Because in the end, it's not about who stayed or who betrayed. It's about who you become when the truth finally sets you free. Would you have done what I did? Would you have walked away or stayed, hoping love could still be enough? Tell me in the comments. And if my story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Because somewhere out there, another woman is finding her voice again, just like I did. Broken Heart with Sparkles.